Welcome to the Alpine Church of Spiritual Living. I'm going to be reading the thought for the week, and in your program, if you want to follow along, then at the bottom you can join me as it gets down into that bolded area. I've chosen to highlight some of the teachings in the book The Wisdom of Dr. David R. Hawkins this month, and this Sunday's topic is moving from ego to service. I've written and spoken about the ego many times. Hawkins describes it as our animal nature. It's neither good nor bad. It primarily separates the individual, nudging and telling us we must fight and scrap for what we need. Hawkins writes, spiritual work is really about overcoming selfishness, self-centeredness, and egocentricity, is that right? Okay, in all of its various disguises. What are the various disguises? Well, the compulsion to have, to own, to be successful, to win, and all of the things that we know as egocentricities. I can't say it again. He goes on to say the ego is impressed by popularity, wanting to be right, vanity, and pridefulness. Give up the vanity of wanting to be right. Richard Rohr, the Franciscan Catholic priest, also writes about the compulsion of the ego being driven into most of us during our first half of life. Here we are concentrating on career, making money and getting ahead, raising children, etc. Once we have done all those things, as we come to the second half of life, many of us look around and think there's got to be something more. Here's where a spiritually minded individual seeks to elevate their consciousness from the animal instinct to seeking a higher level of beingness rather than doingness. Once one steps on the path of intentionally elevating their consciousness, the world and all that's in it, including humans, animals, nature, etc., becomes holy. One sees the intrinsic value to be found everywhere. It's a matter of opening our hearts to accepting and loving ourselves just as we are, and then making the decision to be loving and kind toward all of life. Taking the spiritual path is not guaranteed to be an easy road. Just remember Jesus' teachings, such as it is easier for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. He's telling us to step the ego aside. Say with me, I am ready to consciously step my ego aside, at least recognize it, and move into seeing the holiness and beauty of everything around me, including me. So I was introduced to Dr. David Hawkins a couple years ago as I was studying, and then we in our church have also studied his book, Letting Go, The Pathway of Surrender. And that book got us started on surrendering, on letting go, primarily of the egoic nature, but learning the fact that our feelings aren't something that we should ignore. Our feelings are there to give us guidance. Our feelings are there so that we can recognize them and then release them lovingly so they don't drive us. We let them have their life, and then we can move on from there. It's really about living in the now at all times, in this eternal now, at every moment. In the introduction to the book, I brought it with me, in case you, The Wisdom of Dr. David R. Hawkins, looks like this. Primarily, it's taken from many of his lectures. He has all sorts of lectures that he did that you'll find if you want to look it up on YouTube, and you'll see him there. But in the introduction to the book that we're going to be studying this month, I'm trusting that's what our next book study is going to be, it said in the introduction, as you read this book, you will perhaps realize why someone described his lecture style as a mixture of Einstein, the Buddha, and Mr. Magoo. He was a liberated being, free, spontaneous, compassionate, humorous, and totally available. His spaciousness welcomed everyone and everything. Being in his presence, you knew he saw into you. He saw through your facades, and he loved you exactly as you were. He addressed himself to the greater self, capital S, within you. The first sentence that I underlined in this book and starred said, "What you see is a projection of your own consciousness." That is a packed full sentence. What you see is a projection of your own consciousness. If man is to progress to realize the ultimate divinity, which is the core of his existence, then it would require progressively growing into that dimension of awareness. So we're here to grow into the awareness that we have this ultimate divinity within us. So our focus on life is to recognize that this divinity, which is infinite in nature, is living this life through us. The very first book that Hawkins wrote was Power versus Force. It was written in 2002. And in that, he states, and again he states in this book, that force is limited because force is within form, where power is non-dual. It has no limitation. It is infinite. When we try to force something, we can be successful for a little while, but ultimately it loses that strength because it is not something that is infinite in nature. As we grow in awareness and as we grow in our consciousness, then we're able to access this infinite power within us. We don't have to go anywhere. It's right here innately within us, born in every single one of us. So what are the things, if we aren't experiencing that beautiful, pristine power of the infinite in our lives, why? What's keeping it from expressing itself? I believe a lot of it has to do with habits. I believe we get into this grind of day, the ruts, so to speak, and we do things typically again and again. We think the same thoughts again and again until there's no room for true creativity, for true unlimited expression of this infinite. We get focused, as Richard Rohr said, and the ego itself is so strong within us in that first part of our lives, especially where we're creating a career for ourselves, we're raising children, we're doing all these things, and we have these habits that we create. One of them is primarily focusing on the body. How many times have I thought, what am I fixing for dinner tonight? You know, what kind of new recipe? To me, that's exciting. To me, it's fun and creative, but it also is focused on the body. We also have habits that we get into, like turning on the TV. You know, if there's a football game on or a baseball game on, I'll be there for that. But how many times do we lull ourselves into that stupor of letting life just go by us rather than literally engaging in it at every moment? So when we are on the course, have the intention to develop our consciousness, to let this consciousness move through us, because at every moment we are at choice. This is one thing that he brings up. Whether we recognize it or not, every single moment we are making some sort of choice. And the song that I was thinking of this morning as I was thinking about this was one of Marcy Baruch's songs. And at every moment, the choice is our fate. whatever the choice that we determine to make ultimately becomes our fate. Now, Hawkins describes it as our karma. You say that word and then, oh my gosh, there's all sorts of prickles that can go up around that word. But primarily what he's talking about is the fact that we are setting in motion what life is responding to us as. So if we are, and in our teachings, we speak a lot about the power of the spoken word. Some of us have been reading Emmett Fox lately and the 7-day mental diet and keeping our thoughts focused on the positive rather than the negative. And that's just one of the basics of our teaching. I thought that it was interesting how Hawkins and Richard Rohr, because I read a daily reading of Richard Rohr's, coincide. They're parallel to me. In Rohr's reading this week, he said I'll say this, contemplative, is that right? Contemplative. I knew I had the accent on the right syllable. The contemplative mind is really just the mind that emerges when we pray first instead of think first. How many times do we just think first rather than accessing the power of tapping in? He basically said prayer opens the field and moves beyond fear, judgment, agenda, and analysis, and just lets the moment be what it is, as it is. Can you imagine that? Letting the moment be just as it is. Not having to feel that it's wrong or right, judgment of any sort, just sitting in the awareness that this is what life is presenting to me now. So we talk about elevating our consciousness, maturing our consciousness is really what it's about. Because when we are immature, we don't understand, we don't get the higher levels of what life is really giving us. So to let go of these judgments, of the limitation, of the worry, of the concern, of right and wrong, and just be open, be curious, be available to what Spirit is bringing me right at this moment. The ego is a dualistic type of thing in nature. It has black and white. And in order for us to grow in consciousness, as Rohr says, we need to have a yes and mentality. To not leave anything out. When we can let go of our personal expectations and accept life as it is, accept myself as I am, warts and all, whatever I think I deem as less than, if I can just know that this is where I am at the moment. Consider the lilies of the field. They never toil or spin. Consider having a beginner's mind, a mind that is accepting, that is open. I think one of the most easiest ways that we can have that beginner mind, that mind that gets us out of the egoic and into the flexibility and the subtleness of that open-mindedness, is to just literally tell ourselves, I don't know. I don't know. And we're talking about the I of the ego, not the capital I of the big self. The I of me, the big I of me, the self of me knows, but the egoic I of me many times doesn't know, cannot see the big picture. But there is one. There is a big picture. That for many of us, I get the analogy of us being a little mouse, going along the floor, and we have our little our little whiskers out this far, and we're just sniffing around trying to see what crumbs we can find, when there is so much more to life that's available to us that we need to step into and recognize, step into that knowing that I am an infinite being. This I am of me, let it run its course through me. And I don't know what it's going to do, but I trust it. I trust that within me there is a power for infinite good. And it needs me. How many of you are still reading Eileen Cady's daily morning readings that they gave that book out? She talks about that a lot. This isn't she. This is a channeled work that God is writing all of these messages. But it's continually saying, let me work through you. Step that ego aside and let me be what I am through you. This spiritual awakening is continually a letting go process. Letting go of the lesser. As I said in the prayer this morning, cleaning the glass, getting rid of the residue, those habits that we have created for ourselves, stepping out from them into newness. What if you said to yourself, I am whole, complete, and perfect just as I am? What if you said that to yourself every day? Maybe several times a day. If you think it's the truth, it can have a positive impact on you. If you don't believe it, it's just a bunch of words coming out of your mouth that have no impact on your life. But if you can literally let go of all the expectations that this egoic mind is giving you, and you can say to yourself, I am whole, complete, and perfect, just as I am, warts and all. Does that make you feel free? Does it make you feel happy? I believe that's why we're here. We're here to elevate this consciousness that we have. In fact, you are exactly perfectly complete at every moment based on the elevation of your consciousness. We are here to learn, to grow, to expand, to let this infinite be what we are. Trust that you are always in your right and perfect place. Trust that you are growing, changing, and letting go of the lesser. Trust that life, God, and the infinite is for you. There is no separation. You and life, you and God, you and love are one. There can be no separation, for it is all one. Trust that you are here to do amazing things. Every year at our Anton retreat, we have the Emerson graduation process that goes on. It's a beautiful graduation. Usually there's, 25, 30 people who are graduating from Emerson Institute with some sort of a degree in religious studies, or it could be in animal chaplaincy. There's all sorts of different categories. But one of the songs that they sing in that beautiful ceremony is that you will do amazing things. I don't know if you remember that song, but boy, it's a tearjerker. You will do amazing things. Trust that you will do amazing things. Trust that each choice you make comes from your higher self. And what you need to do then is to stop, and before you think, using this small egoic mind, pray. And I don't mean pray, begging, beseeching. I mean open up the floodgates to the communication of this higher God self, this higher love that is within. And let it direct your path. Let it direct your words and your deeds. Our topic this morning was moving from ego to service. Service comes when we can let go of worrying about ourselves. And when we can step into that act of compassion, of giving, of serving, of loving, that provides so much more of a growth opportunity for not only us, but for everyone. For every single person who elevates their consciousness, it helps all of humankind. It helps all of mankind. So I want to ask you a favor. You're sitting there by yourself. Sit there and give yourself a hug. Not cross your arms. Hug yourself. There we go. Give yourself a hug. Think about Louise Hay and what wonderful lessons she taught us to love ourselves, that I can do amazing things. And see that for all of us, that we all will do amazing things in this life, to serve, to give, to be this infinite self that we are. So go out there and have a fabulous, beautiful, fun-filled day. Namaste.
Thank you.